Assalamu alaikum, Brother Niyaaz. How are you? I'm so glad that you're on this episode right now. How are you feeling?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, really good. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your episode. Really privileged and honored to be here. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, how would you, Brother Niyaaz, describe yourself to the audience as to what you do for work in your daily life?
So I am the principal and founder of Next Step Leadership Group Limited. It's a consultancy that aims to develop leaders, particularly from a minority background, or what I describe as people who have non-dominant voices. And I provide coaching and leadership facilitation services to help these people to actually, number one, identify that they are themselves leaders and that they have leadership potential and characteristics within them, and then to actually help them through coaching and development to actually bring those attributes to the fore.
Cool, awesome. So I just want to take you back to how you actually were interested in this role of, being a consultant and helping people find out if they have, that voice of leadership. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get this sense of feeling that, you wanted to go down this path?
Yeah. So before I even knew what coaching was, I was probably doing that very early in my career. I think it's just I've come to learn later on in life that one of my values, or one of the ways that I love to show up, is through service. And so I've always been the kind of person that helps out, and without knowing it, people used to come to me to ask for help and stuff like that. And so very early on in my careers, whether I was in a leadership role or not, I would end up helping others either through coaching or mentoring. I didn't really know what the terminology meant back then.
Yeah.
So it's something I've kind of done throughout my career, professionally and in community spaces as well. But more recently, it's kind of been more of a deliberate decision to go and do it on my own as a business, so to speak. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's awesome. So was there anything in your childhood or in your past that made you want to, go down this path, that made you trigger into, maybe you were a leader or you weren't a leader in your childhood, maybe. So yeah, I just wanted to know, maybe your childhood triggered it or not.
So funny enough, when I was at school, I wanted to be a teacher, probably because my mum and both her sisters have always been teachers. So I've always seen that, and so I enjoyed. I enjoyed the idea of it. And then I got to high school, and then I thought, whoa, what if I get kids like me in my class? And that would be a nightmare. So then I decided, not going to do that anymore. But I always enjoyed teaching. I used to teach very early, and I used to, like I said, I used to help out wherever I could. But I used to teach martial arts when I became experienced enough. I used to end up. I was teaching from a fairly early stage in my martial arts career. I was working and helping others when I was working part-time. Even when I was studying, I was always kind of, even though I wasn't necessarily, the smartest person around, but I don't know, people used to kind of seek me out. And I was just reflecting on this the other day, that because I was actually coaching someone else, and I realized that sometimes you don't actually see your own leadership or your own potential, and others have to see that in you. And so it always used to kind of be weird that sometimes, for example, I was, asked to lead to be the captain of the squash team at school, or to captain one of the cricket teams, and it didn't really, because I wasn't the best player. But it was kind of strange for me. And then, but now when I look back as an adult, and I realize through coaching that actually it's not necessarily the best players that end up being the captains or the leaders, and that it took me a while to realize that. But yes, I could kind of see there was that, but I wouldn't have noticed it at the time. I do see it. I see the signs in hindsight, shall I say.
So you're saying that you didn't recognize it yourself, but did you have someone else help you get that feeling of you are a potential leader?
Yes, I think I think one of the earlier signs was that I remember I was in my second to last year of high school, and we had, it was either second to last year or last year, and we had what we then called the SRC, Student Representative Councils, and somebody said, you should go for it, you should put your hand up to do it. And I thought, well, not really, because I wasn't, I don't know, I didn't recognize myself in that way. And then I did my speech and everything. I ended up not getting the chairmanship or the presidency, but I ended up being the vice president or something. But a teacher came up to me afterwards and she said, you know what? I was looking at you, listening to your speech, and the way that you spoke, and you spoke from the heart, and you spoke from a place of care and real, like, wanting to build other people up. It was really heartwarming. Again,
Mm-hmm.
it probably didn't click for me at that stage, but I remember it now, thinking, actually, yeah, there were obviously people who saw me operate in a certain way, who realized that I did have that potential. But I don't think I potentially harness that in the way that I could have from an early age, I guess. Yeah.
So if I were, let's say, a 15-year-old kid in high school, and I wanted to know if I was a good leader or not, what are some things that I should look in myself, whether it be personality, whether it be passion, whether it be any sort of other personality trait? How would I know in myself that, I am a potential leader? And if I do know, then how can I build upon those skills to become a better leader?
That is a great question. The the beautiful thing about leadership is that it has so many different facets, and not everyone has the same leadership style. So for me personally, my leadership style is about collaboration and bringing people together and influencing through relationships, whereas others are based on being really good at what they do and then being able to take people along them on the journey. And then others are great at taking the bull by the horns, so to speak, and just going ahead and waiting, sometimes not waiting for others to catch up.
Yeah.
So there's different leadership styles for different occasions, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm of the view that regardless of whatever leadership style you portray in certain scenarios, if you have a deep sense of care for people and you want to serve and you have the sense of responsibility to help others, to do what's right, to do the good thing, I reckon that's the inherent characteristics of leadership. Now, the thing is with leadership, it's not something you're necessarily born with. And this is something which people often get sidetracked by. They say, oh, I'm not a leader, I can't lead. Well, that's not true. And if you don't mind me quoting a hadith of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says that, every one of you is a leader. Every one of you uses the word ra'i, which is like a shepherd, a guardian. The man in the home, the woman over their family, the imam in the masjid, the community leader, the elder brother to the younger brother, the sister to the youngest, the cousin to the old. We all have some sort of guardianship. And if not that, then we certainly have some guardianship over ourselves. So, to answer your question, it's a tricky one to answer. However, I believe that every one of us has some sort of leadership responsibility. Now, some of it might be broad, might end up being a leader of a nation or a leader of a big organization. But others of us will end up being leaders of a family, potentially. Leaders of ourselves, even if that's the bare minimum. So everyone is a leader. How we tap into that is about that sense of care and responsibility and a sense of accountability to do the right thing. Yep.
So do you think it's very important to have a mentor when it comes to leadership?
Yes and no. I mean, you obviously, if you have a mentor, it's going to help you, of course. That's just without a doubt. If you have someone that you can look up to, that can guide you and can teach you from the lessons that they've learned, that will obviously be very beneficial. If you do it yourself, you're probably just going to have to learn by doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It might just slow you down potentially. So having someone who you can rely on, I would certainly recommend, if you have the opportunity, to reach out to people who have been there and done that. That is essentially what mentorship is someone who's kind of been down the path where you kind of aspire towards, and reach out and say, hey, so-and-so, I've really admired the way that you show up in this particular aspect regarding whatever your sphere is. I would love for you to be able to spend some time with you, if you don't mind, helping me to identify the things that you've done that that I can learn from, so I don't have to burn myself as in the same way that you have. It's really interesting because I remember one of the earlier times when I did that, and I reached out to someone who I looked up to. And he was so surprised, when I reached out to him, he was like, you want me to mentor you? What do you see in me that's kind of mentorship material? And then, like, for me personally, it was exactly what I spoke about earlier, because I recognized that I looked out for people who cared for people who had people at the center of their decision making in terms of their leadership. And this particular person really appealed to me in that way. And for him, it was a shock that I was actually approaching him. He was quite honored and taken aback. And we're still good, very friends to this day, actually. Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest questions I get a lot, because I am a leader myself. I've been a leader of my local cricket team. I'm a leader of my local mosque as well. So a lot of people question me and ask me, since you are, Ayan, a very good leader and you've been doing very well as a role model to others, what's one thing that a lot of leaders get wrong when it comes to helping people, when it comes to leading people?
Look, we're human beings. We're going to make lots and lots and lots and lots of mistakes. That's just a given.
Mm.
The trick here is that you either succeed or you learn.
Mm.
That's the thing. And I think one of the things that a leader needs to be comfortable with is with being making mistakes, because you can't learn without making mistakes.
Mm.
There was one perfect person that was ever created, and that we are not that person, and we're never going to be that person, right?
Yeah.
And so, as a leader, as anyone really, we need to come to terms with the fact that we are going to make mistakes along the way, and how we deal with those mistakes, how we deal with those. I don't like to call them failures. I like to call them lessons, because you look at it, you say, actually, what is the lesson I'm being taught here, and how can I build from that? And when you're comfortable with that within yourself, then you are also willing to share that and become vulnerable with those you lead, because people will see that in you. It's like, oh, this guy doesn't know it all, but he's still able to go and continue and shine. So I would say lots of things to learn, but that would probably be the underlying things. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to seek perfection. You don't have to seem like you know it all. In fact, that's probably the worst thing to do. You need to be able to be comfortable with who you are, knowing that you have limitations, doing your best, of course. Any leader needs to be competent in their area of whatever it is that they are leading in. You don't necessarily, like I said, the example that I used, you don't necessarily have to be the best of the best, but you certainly need to have a level of competence where people can actually respect that you bring some level of credibility to whatever it is that you are leading in. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Very awesome. You talked about leadership skills and leadership characteristics just a few minutes ago, and how there's different types of leaders and they lead in different ways.
Yeah.
So do you think that certain skills are much better to have as a leader than others? So is it better to have, for example, let's say, emotional intelligence over, IQ or normal intelligence as a leader?
The reality is you need all of those things. That's the reality. However, again, coming back to my point earlier, you don't have to be perfect in everything. So the underlying premise, and I think I like to look it down as, number one is leadership of self. Okay, how do you lead yourself? Number two is how you lead others. That's the key, is first looking at yourself. What is it that I need to be good at within myself, regardless of, because like I said, the very basic thing is you leading yourself. Then the second thing is, okay, how do I then get the skills and the capabilities, etc., to be able to lead others? And then once you've done that, you can start thinking of, okay, how do you lead organizations? How do you lead leaders of leaders? How do you then lead systems, etc., etc.? So they build up from there. But the very center of it, the very basic part, is first and foremost is to lead yourself. So in that respect, I think there is a level of self awareness that's required in a leader, and that ties back to your emotion, your EQ aspect. So EQ is essentially knowing yourself, being self-aware, being able to show up. I like to describe it, it's probably not a technical way to describe it, but kind of the third person in the conversation kind of thing. So you and I are having this conversation, but my EQ controller, whatever you want to call it, is kind of watching this conversation and giving me signs to say, actually, Niyaaz, that's not the right thing to say right now. Niyaaz, you need to be quiet now, kind of thing, Yeah. So it's always useful to have that, regardless of the stage of leadership in. And I reckon that is definitely, I've seen lots of really smart people, intelligent people, really be quite destructive leaders, unfortunately. And I've seen people who are not necessarily the greatest at their craft, competent, but not necessarily the greatest, be the best of leaders because they can bring the best out in others. So I'm a little bit biased here because I'm a generalist. I'm not a technical leader per se in any particular field. I'm not saying that technical leaders can't be great people leaders. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that you do need to be able to connect with people and be able to lead yourself in a way that actually people will follow you, not because of your title or because of your age or because of the family you come from or the name you have, but because they feel influenced by your leadership style. Yeah. Skill in terms of skills and capabilities and stuff. Skills can always be learned. Communication is a skill. It can be learned. Listening is a skill. It can be learned. I don't know. Empathy. Some people will think, you're either born with empathy or not. Empathy is a skill that can be learned. Some of us are just, we're born less sort of emotionally connected to others than others. That's just how Allah made us. But we can learn how to be more engaging and more listening to other people. Those are things that you can actually learn. So again, what I said before is some people believe that leadership is, kind of a thing that you're born with, but I don't believe that at all. I think it's something you can learn the skills to be a leader, and you can train yourself to have the you can call them. Some people refer to them as soft skills. I'm not sure about the terminology, but the things like EQ, the ability to have empathy, all of those things. Those are all things you can actually learn how to be better at. Yeah.
It's really awesome because you touched upon soft skills, and I think nowadays a lot of young people are lacking that the most, just because of how society is being run, how many young people are invested in TV shows and staying inside homes, and now new problems arise. Now AI is here, and a lot of people are dependent on it, and so people are slowly losing these skills of communication, problem solving, learning how to deal with others. So as a leader yourself, how would you make sure that young people, ages, let's say 14 to 18, 19 years old, can, improve upon these skills and build them even with these distractions in the way?
Yeah. It's always, when people ask me questions about, youth of our age kind of thing, it always reminds me of the story of, I want to say, okay, I'll tell you the story and then you kind of see who it was. But there's a quote that goes, it says like, youth of our age, can you believe the kind of music they listen to and all of these things? And so you'd imagine that that's someone kind of from the 20th century type of thing. But it was actually, I might be wrong, it's either Plato or Socrates that said this.
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. But so what I'm just saying is that this is not new. It's not a new phenomenon. And so if I look back at my own, the first sort of permanent full-time job that I had was in a contact center, a call center. And one of the things we learned through the training is that how often were you taught to answer the phone? Nobody teaches you how to answer a phone. And it's something that in that age, when I was growing up, it was something you do all the time. There was no cell phones at that stage. You just, the house phone would be there and you'd go and answer the phone. But nobody taught you, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to respond to people, etc. And so it's really interesting that we learned, and I became a really good call operator, went on to become other, kind of progressed and stuff like that. But I learned. And so part of me is like, poor kids these days because they're born with these things in their hands. They don't know anything else. And the other side of me is actually quite the optimist and saying, actually, well, if we could get through that, we weren't taught how to answer a phone, and eventually we became capable to do that. And I'm sure my parents and my grandparents had to go through similar types of things. Human beings are resilient. Human beings are adaptive. So on the one hand, I get the point that it is a challenge. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, actually, they'll get through, inshallah. So one of the things which is quite scary is how, and this is not, I don't think it's only youth, but youth in particular are engaging with AI, generative AIs particularly, as a buddy. This, I think, is quite scary because, if, and I'm not an expert on AI, but I understand part of it's the rehashing and the reinterpreting of things which you already want to hear. So when you put something into a generative AI tool, it's going to feed you the kinds of things which you are kind of asking it for. So it's kind of reinforcing the things that you already want. And this is not useful to create a critical mindset. It's not useful to create critical thinking and also that self-awareness element. So that is something quite scary. However, again, I would encourage young people, and one of the things is to identify, and young people might not see this for themselves because it's very hard for someone to recognize when they have the challenge of being stuck to something and they can't let it go. I almost want to use the word addicted, but I don't want to use the word lightly. But there is a sense of addiction or connection to these devices in a way that's actually not useful for us. And so the only way to actually overcome that is, number one, is to identify that. And because if you're in that situation yourself, you can't obviously see it for yourself. So I would encourage young people to hear what the older people or the elders or the good trusted friends around them are actually saying to them. Hey, look, you're spending 3-4 hours on that device and all you're doing is just... This cannot be healthy. This cannot be healthy for us. So we have to, and this is not just for you, this is for all of us. We have to separate. We have to have some boundaries around the use of technology, and there's lots and lots of benefits from it. But we need to be able to kind of bookmark that or bench, have some boundaries and limitations around that as well. Yeah.
So just to counterattack those distractions, are there some particular exercises that can make you a good leader? If there are, then I would love to hear them.
Absolutely. Well, look, there's a lot you can do. Number one is simple things. Is physical exercise. Getting out and doing something physical is really, really useful. And I'm always amazed when I'm out. I run for fitness, and I see most people have a headset on their heads like yours, like the full-on ones, or they have earbuds in, and they're running with these things in. And I mean, to each their own. But I used to, when I first started running, I used to listen to Nasheed and things like that. And then afterwards, I realized actually I'm missing out here, because when you're running, for me, it's a form of, so from a martial arts perspective, we say it's moving Zen. It's moving Zen. So when you're in a running stage, and especially if you're if you're a distance runner, there comes a point when you just kind of forget what you're doing, and then that's when you connect with something deeper. And so I feel that people who do go out running or in the gym on a treadmill or whatever, and they have these headphones in, and it doesn't matter what they're listening to, but they're not giving that chance to actually listen to for their brains to reconnect with themselves, and giving their soul a chance as well to connect, and you to connect with that fitra, that what's sitting inside of you. And I think that's something missing. So number one, physical exercise, very, very important. Get out there and be physical. So get yourself away from devices as much as you want to stay on it. And it's tempting. Have a regular routine of exercise as well. There's a reason why we are asked and advised to go to the masjid and pray in Jama'ah, especially for men, because going out is part of it. Get out of the house, number one. Number two is getting together and creating that Jama'ah, that community. So that's another way, is to make sure that you have a group. And as I'm talking about, you don't have to have 50 or 100 people that you're in touch with. A small group of trusted people that you can communicate with, that you can connect with in something which is common. It doesn't have to be about, something amazing like, we're going to build this business together, or we're going to build this enterprise. No, it's something simple. You might have an interest in basketball. You might have an interest in chess, something, but make sure that you have that community, and you're not doing it just online via text, and go out and meet each other. Go to each other's homes, meet at the coffee shop, go to the masjid together, whatever, meet on the sports field. These are all ways to connect. So I think physical exercise, getting out and connecting with others is really, really important. And for young people, especially if you are in a family environment and you have younger siblings or something, sometimes you get frustrated. They're so annoying and all these things. They can actually really be very helpful for you to learn how to be more self-aware and to improve your ability to lead. Because I can tell you this, that you are going to come across as a leader in later on in life with people who are going to frustrate you. They're going to annoy you. And you're not going to be able to, just take a pillow and whack them over the head, anything like you would your little sibling or something like that. You're going to have to find a way within yourself to communicate that frustration. in a constructive manner. So there's another, I see it as a learning opportunity. Saying, okay, let's pause here. Okay, how am I going to deal with this? This little kid is really annoying me. How can I deal with him in a constructive manner? And so it's not always easy because, you just want to get out there and just, but to engage with our families in a constructive manner it's a real skill, actually, because you're learning how to communicate, how to express your frustrations, because family, you're going to have frustrations, you're going to have conflict, and being able to communicate that in a way which is not destructive, but actually, building everybody up. That's another way that you can actually just connect, even within your home as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of move on to a different topic.
Sure. Sorry, can I add one more thing to that? Sorry, I touched on it, Billy, if you don't mind. Sorry. So I touched on the physical, I touched on the community aspect, I touched on the connection with yourself when you're doing those exercises as well. But I just touched on the effect of going to the masjid and community and stuff like that. But one thing we need to really realize is who we are. We are creation. We are being created by a creator. And there's no one ever that you're going to come across that knows us better than our creator. So we need to find ways to reconnect with our creator in a way that is meaningful. For those of us who pray, putting your head down on the floor in prayer, connecting with our creator is, I cannot overstate this enough, is we need to spend time, deliberate time, not just rushing up, down, touch the ground kind of prayers to get them through. We need to appeal, because Allah says to us, if you come to me walking, I will come to you running. If you come to me a handspan, I'll come to you an arm's length. You just need to make the effort. And wallahi, if we make the effort, Allah will come to us. So we need, it doesn't matter how, we might feel, I don't pray very often, or I'm not fasting every Ramadan, or I have I swear and I have bad friends. It's okay. Allah is merciful. Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. Okay? We need to reconnect with our creator. And the sooner you can do that in your youth, the world will be your oyster, because that's where you're going to get your real power from. You're not going to get it from all of the leadership skills. That leadership within self is going to come from your fitrah, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I cannot overstate that enough, is find ways to connect with your creator. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you and you're going to ask me something else, but I just realized it's a very important aspect which I missed out on. So
it's very important. Yeah, I love how you touched on it. It's very important. I wanted to talk about careers, and as much as we know how bad the job market is in New Zealand, how can someone like me or someone younger find out what they want to do in their whole life, and not just career itself, but enjoy what they do?
Yep.
Because they're going to be doing it for a very long time, hopefully. And I want young people to choose a career and enjoy it. So how would someone like me be able to do that?
Yep. That's a wonderful question. And it's often something that, it's quite a newish concept, I think, because, or maybe it's not, maybe we've just, certain cultures have had a different view on it. So there's some cultures, because your parents, and especially I think this generation, maybe my generation, less so than the next, like our parents were the product of a generation that went through the Great Depression. So they suffered lots of calamities. Many of the, it depends on different, we're different for different types of families and such. However, the parents of my generation, they saw the value in education, and they saw the value in some cultures is getting into an occupation or career that is stable, because they saw that what the result of kind of being in certain areas which is quite volatile and stuff. So they were very big on getting the kids into, number one, education, to get them educated, and then going into professions, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an engineer, etc., etc. And I think that's great. However, I think we sometimes miss the bigger picture here, is that not everybody was made to be a doctor. Not everybody was made to be a lawyer. We need people who can teach. We need people who can communicate and share the word. We need people who can fix electricity electrical things. We need people who can do plumbing. We need all of these things. We need all of these people. And I think one of the challenges some of our cultures have is that we see certain occupations as being more prestigious than others. And so this is a challenge we need to overcome. What I as a, and I was very lucky and I'm very grateful to my parents. They didn't push us to go down any particular professions. They did say you need to be educated, number one. But what that education looked like would be different to me than it was to my brother or my sister. They would always say, do your best. And if you achieve whatever you achieve, as long as you're doing your best. And so that's the mantra that I have as well with my kids is I don't care if you fail or if you pass an exam. But if you did your best, then that's your best, and that's the way that you did it. But if I see you sitting around and you're wasting your time and you're not doing anything, and then you fail, and you don't get the excellence or the merit or the achieve that you're aiming for, then guess who needs to wear that? You need to wear that because you didn't put in the effort. So coming back to the career side of things, is we need to find this balance between what energizes us, what I regard as to be strengths, things that energize us and that we will then naturally be good at. Okay, versus skills. Skills are things which we may be good at, but we may not necessarily enjoy it as much. So I'll give you a simple example. I like to sing, for example. If I were to sing, my kids would say, Dad, can you please take that downstairs to the shower? Because I'm so good at it, So I'm not going to make money out of singing. But it may be something that I enjoy doing. So I'll do it as a hobby. So it will still get me some energy as an example. Now, there might be something else which I'm really good at. So I'm maybe good at turning information into something very succinct. I can do it. But actually, if I do it too much, it kind of drains me because I get tired of it. But I know that's something that people come to me to do. And so, but I need to balance it and say, actually, yes, I've got these skills, which I'm really good at. But I also have these energizing strengths, which I do. And so how do I find something which is actually the balance between these two things? Because you're not going to just, it's not everybody is going to be able to do everything that's just energizing for them. That's just not the reality of life. So we need to be practical and pragmatic. How you could identify that, of course, is to kind of get a sense of actually when I'm doing certain activities, what are those activities that I can kind of lose track of time in? And I'm not talking about gaming or like chilling and sitting on internet. I'm talking about work. What's the kind of work that I'm doing when I'm actually just lose myself in the time? So that could be, for some people, will be helping others. For others, it might be academically analyzing a piece of for others it's research. For others it's whatever it is, there's so many different ways. And then you identify that because that will tell you what your natural affinity is, your strengths are in terms of that energy, energizing things. And then the flip side as well is what are the things which you I just can't be bothered. It just takes the energy from you. And it's not because, and you need to be careful here is to separate, some of us we tend to be quite lazy. And so we need to get over that aspect. But there are tasks which just drain us. And so get an idea of what those types of tasks are, because those are the ones you want to kind of steer away from. It doesn't mean you can get away from it completely, but you need to be able to have as little of that in your repertoire as much as you can. So those are kind of two of the things. Then the third element is kind of what is it that you bring that others don't bring? So in your case, for example, or my case, so I'll talk about me, because it's all about me. But you asked me the question, so I'll use that question. Yeah. So I am a South African living in New Zealand, married to an Egyptian with grandparents that come from 4 different countries. That in itself is my story. There's no one else, and if I add a few other things, there's no one else that's going to have my story as my story. That's my strength. Now, each of us will have that. We need to look at our lives. Okay, what is it that I've got? And that intersectionality, that intersection where all of those things of my experience counts, in addition to my strengths and my skills, that will give you the sweet spot. Yeah. And then there's a fourth element, which is kind of the practicalities of things. And for young people, I don't think you should worry about it too much, but I'll share it anyway. But it's about the practicalities. Is this a space where I can actually live off it? Because you have to be realistic, you've got to be realistic. Like, how can I monetize this aspect? Is it something that I can actually monetize or that people will be willing to pay for? Because people will be willing to pay for things which addresses a need and fixes a problem for them, and if that's the case, or it has to deliver some sort of value of service or to their lives. So if you can take those 3 elements and say, actually, this can be monetized because I can see a need for it, then, go forth and conquer. For those of you there's a great tool on the careers.gov website, careers.govt.nz. There's a great tool on there that actually helps you to identify some of those things which you have an affinity towards. Now, I'm not saying it's absolutely going to be perfect, but it gives you a kind of idea. You put in your, the things that you enjoy and the kind of things which you're really good at, etc. And it kind of gives you a sense of the kinds of careers that you might want to consider. Yep. But don't let that limit you. That's the only thing I'm saying is I'm just putting that out there. Don't let that limit you. Let it just give you a sense of how you might want to structure it. But make sure you're covering all aspects as well. And if I could just encircle all of those four with how is this career, how is this profession, how is this business, how is this whatever I identify, how does it align with my connection to my creator? How do I actually, because at the end of the day, we created to be in service and in worship of our creator, but how do I do this through whatever it is that I identify? It needs to be an overarching phenomenon in everything we do, but especially in career planning, because sometimes we just think of the money, or we just think of the enjoyment aspect, but we also need to think of the connection to my creator. Is this going to please my creator? So I might be really good at figuring out how to win the lotto, as an example, or how to gamble, or how to make money out of alcohol, or what to rip people off. This is not. I might be really good at it, and it might actually even energize me. But is that right? Is it the right thing to do? Does it connect to my fitra? Is it connection to my creator? And my creator going to be proud of me for doing this? And if I stand in front of my creator on the day when I'm being judged, am I going to be able to say, here's what I did for my life? So that's a really important aspect, is to tie whatever we do in this world is to our akhirah, our afterlife, and to realize that everything we do here is just a journey. It's just a way of getting to our ultimate destination.
That's honestly like the best career advice that I've ever received from anyone. So that's really, really awesome. I wanted to talk about, because everyone has their own story of success and how they've achieved success. And it's usually because of 1 to 2, maybe even 3 small things that they've done consistently over their whole lives. So I wanted to ask, what's one small habit that you've done that's helped you achieve what you've achieved today?
One.
It could be 2 or 3. It's up to you.
Yep. But I think it's a big one because it encapsulates so many others, and I have touched on it before. It is a intra-daily connection with my creator. I say, because I was born into a Muslim family, born as a Muslim, raised as a Muslim, but it was probably only around the age of 25, 26, 27, around that age, when I actually decided to be a Muslim. That's much different to being a Muslim that goes through the motions of, just what you're taught. In some ways, it's almost, when I talk to people who revert to Islam later on in life, I'm almost jealous of them in a good way, because they've actually experienced what it's like. And in their own words, I heard a brother say this the other day, you don't know what light looks like until you've experienced dark. And so I guess for me is a daily reminder and a daily connection back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, I'm not a learned person. I'm not a sheikh. I'm not I don't have I haven't been trained in the deen, as my 7-year-old would say. Baba, are you trained in the deen? That sort of thing. We all need to be trained in the deen in some way or form. But the point is that everything that I have, everything that I've been given, every good experience, every challenging experience, every piece of knowledge I've learned, every skill is not by mistake. It has been given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to be able to have that connection back, and to say, actually, it's like the umbilical cord in a baby in the womb. We cannot operate without that umbilical cord back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will go astray. We will not be fulfilling what He has put us on this earth for. So that's a very big thing. That's a very big thing to answer your question in terms of being consistent, because it's not like I I wrote down one thing every day kind of thing, or I focused on one particular thing. They say that if you do 10,000 hours of a particular skill, then you become the master of it. For me, it still is to have that daily and intra-daily connection and the reminder of who I am and who I am connected to, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah.
What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self who's, if they were just starting out in their career?
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, inshallah. I think that's the biggest thing is when you're young, you think that you need to, whatever success looks like at that stage, but you think that you need to have success very quickly. Because you look at, people who have, you tend to compare yourself to others. That's just the nature of human being, right? And so you look at others, and most of the times that you're comparing yourself are people who actually, you don't realize their stories. It's like, it's the whole Instagram world. It's like, oh my gosh, that guy's they're so amazing. They've got such a lovely family life, and they've got such riches, and they've got, that's all so cool. But actually, when you come to realize that actually it's not true. It's all a fake thing, and it hasn't changed over the generations. Now it just becomes more amplified, more magnified, I guess, through social media. But it hasn't changed. And so I think my advice to my younger self would be, don't compare yourself to others. It will be all right. You are on your journey. This is your journey, and there's no one else that can walk your journey. There's no one else that's going to be able to walk the same journey that you are going to be walking on. And then in the end, it's going to be all right, inshallah. Yeah.
We have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask the guests to create a question for the audience to answer. So in the previous episode, the guest that I had, he made the audience ask themselves as to what change would you make right now to have success tomorrow. So what would your question be towards the audience?
My question would be, what are you most afraid of in being successful? What are you most afraid of in being successful? The reason I ask that question is because many of us have certain visions of success. And the only reason that stops us from going towards it is because we are fearful of what might be. And fear is not something to run away from. Fear is something to run towards. Fear is a natural human emotion. And if anybody tells you don't be scared, it's impossible. You can't not be scared. The point is to feel the fear and just do it anyway.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brother Niyaaz, in joining me on this episode. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too as well. And for the audience watching as well, if you would like to get in contact with Brother Niyaaz, then I'll have his LinkedIn in the description down below. On top of that, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ayan. Thank you so much for having me.